Good morning. My name is Stuart Stedman. I'm chairman of the coordinating board. The time is now 9:03, and I'd like to call the October 22nd quarterly board meeting to order. The meeting is being held via video conference, and please be aware that although we're meeting via video conference, the meeting is still being broadcast via the internet, and those present in the boardroom may be visible to the public. Before we begin, I'd like to take this opportunity to welcome those joining us via video and ask that they observe the following etiquette. Please state your name before you speak, mute your microphone when not speaking, and keep background noise to a minimum. Members will begin with a roll call to ensure that we have a quorum. When I call your name, please respond to confirm that you're on the call. Javed Anwar, Cody Campbell.
Here.
Fred Farias.
Here.
Mr. Raven cannot attend today. Emma Swartz.
Here.
Sam Torn.
Here.
Donna Williams. I see Donna waving. So she is here. She's dealing with those speaker problems, perhaps. Anyway, and then welcome Wilson.
Here.
Levi McClenny.
Here.
And please excuse the absence of Ricky Raven due to duties requiring his attention elsewhere. Do I have a motion to approve his absence?
So moved.
Aye.
Motion by Mr. Anwar.
Emma.
Second by Mr. Wilson. All in favor, just say aye.
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 Hearing no. Those opposed, say no. Hearing none, please record in the minutes we have a quorum. Members, to ensure we have maintained a quorum, please keep your cameras turned on during the duration of the meeting. Let's see, I have an opening announcement. The Texas Higher Education Leadership Conference. The annual Texas Higher Education Leadership Conference will be held as a virtual event on November 19th. The virtual leadership conference will begin at 1 p.m. on November 19th. With the new governing board orientation sessions that satisfy the statutory training requirements for the newly appointed regents and elected trustees will also include the Commissioner's State of Higher Education Address. More information regarding this conference is available on the coordinating board's website under Topics of Interest. Let's see, our first agenda item is 1A, Commissioner's Remarks. The Commissioner will provide his remarks on some of the agenda items we'll be discussing today. Commissioner?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you all. I'm delighted to be here with you in person for a board meeting after several months of conference calls and Zoom meetings. So the October board meetings are always busy, especially given the large number of reports that are due between now and the start of legislative session. But I did want to take a few minutes to address a couple of important items that the board will be discussing today. So first, I'm excited about our major policy discussion on 60 by 30 Texas and the work that we'll be doing together and in partnership with the Higher Education Foundation to review and refine our state higher education goals. So as you all know, this is something that we've been talking about pre-COVID, and I think in the current climate, it's even more important that we're going to be launching this work. Next, we've previously discussed the transition of the Texas OnCourse initiative from UT Austin to the coordinating board. So as a reminder, Texas OnCourse is an initiative that I'd founded at UT Austin in my previous role with support from the legislature and in partnership with Governor Abbott's Tri-Agency Workforce Initiative. So we have developed an agreement with UT Austin for Texas OnCourse to officially join our agency, and today we'll be seeking your approval for this agreement. Associate Commissioner Melissa Henderson will be going into greater detail on this effort later in the meeting, but I believe that this transition is going to allow Texas OnCourse to serve many more educators, advisors, students across the state, and offer vital support, better advising during a time when students and their families are experiencing a tremendous disruption. OnCourse is also going to play an important role in our agency's larger portfolio as we're taking the lead at the coordinating board on college and career advising for the Governor's Tri-Agency Workforce Initiative. I also wanted to take a minute to provide a brief update on the Governor's Emergency Education Relief Fund. This was funding that was allocated to the coordinating board this summer In late August, we issued contracts to public and private institutions of higher education for distribution of the first $103.5 million in gear funding for financial aid. So the first $57 million of that went to maintain our major need-based financial aid programs. So the Texas Grant Program, the Texas Educational Opportunity Grant Program, and the Tuition Equalization Grant Program. The remaining $46.5 million was distributed to our public institutions for additional emergency aid for students who had been impacted by COVID. What we'd heard from a number of institutions is they were seeing more students who were having trouble paying their tuition and fee bills this fall, and so these dollars were allocated quickly to the institutions to help provide a little additional emergency aid. And I want to thank all of our institutions for their partnership with us and the distribution of these funds and making sure that we could have a quick turnaround. These funds are going to make a real difference for our students to help make sure that they can stay on track and help bolster our enrollment at our institutions. We have received approval from the governor's office for the remainder of the funds allocated to the coordinating board, so the remaining $71.5 million that was allocated to the agency. Yesterday, we issued a request for applications for $46.5 million in targeted financial aid for upskilling and reskilling displaced workers who might need short-term workforce credentials to help them get back on their feet, get back into the workforce, and help drive the Texas recovery. And also for Texans who have some college but no credential had previously stopped out of higher education. Next week, we're going to issue a second request for applications related to improving online teaching and learning by providing grants to enhance quality in open educational resources and online course offerings. So these open educational resources will be available for no cost to students in three categories. So frequently transferred core courses, college readiness materials, and also workforce education materials. Again, I want to emphasize that we are grateful to Governor Abbott, to Lieutenant Governor Patrick, Speaker Bonin, and the legislative leadership for their support in directing $175 million in gear funding to higher education. And I've spent a lot of time talking to colleagues around the country about the discussions in their states, and I think this commitment in Texas represents a strong statement from our state leadership that they recognize the importance of higher education for helping us navigate this crisis and drive economic recovery. This funding is going to help tens of thousands of Texas students and their families continue or restart their progress towards earning a post-secondary credential or degree, and I look forward to continued dialogue with the board, our institutions, and with the legislature about this important work. And finally, before I hand it back over to you, Mr. Chairman, I do want to take a brief moment just to note that this month marks my first anniversary as Commissioner of Higher Education, and it has not been the first year I might have expected, but I continue to be excited about this work. So we've made meaningful progress across multiple fronts, and I am grateful for the opportunity to serve this board, to serve our agency and our state as Commissioner of Higher Education. I'm very appreciative of the strong support I've received this year from all of you, from the board members, from the governor's office, the legislative leadership, key legislators, and especially from our institutions and our system leaders. So it's a privilege for me to work with you, and together we are making a real difference for individual Texans and our higher education institutions across the state. So I just want to say thank you, and I'm proud of what we've already achieved and excited about the work ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Yes, it seems like longer than a year, doesn't it? I mean, like 2 or 3, maybe. Anyway, thank you for that, and congratulations on your anniversary. The next agenda item is public testimony. We do not have anyone registered to testify today, so we'll go on to the next item. The next agenda item is approval of minutes of previous meetings, and we have several. Do I have a motion to approve the meetings for the July quarterly board meeting?
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Torn.
Second.
Second by Mr. Anwar. Any discussion? Members, those in favor say aye. Those opposed say no.
Aye.
Any noes? Motion passes. Let's see, the next agenda item next approval is the approval of the August special called board meeting. Do I have a motion? Motion by Mr. Hanwar,
Emma will second.
second by Ms. Swartz. Any discussion? Those in favor say aye.
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 Those opposed say no. Hearing no noes, motion passes. Do I have a motion for the approval of the minutes of the September special called board meeting?
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Torn,
Second.
second by Mr. Anwar. Members, those in favor say aye. Those opposed say no.
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, hearing no noes, motion passes. Next is the item on the agenda is the consent calendar. And we're going to take up the consent calendar in two parts, non-rule items and then rule items. We'll get into a discussion about why. Our General Counsel will kind of explain. The consent calendar includes non-controversial items that we think we can approve without comment or discussion. This allows us to save time for other items that need more of our attention. Highlighted items in gray are the consent items on the agenda. You've had time in advance to review the items, and of course any board member can request that an agenda item be removed from the consent calendar. This will give us an opportunity to discuss that item or items more fully later in the meeting. The items we placed on the non-ruled consent calendar today are 7C, consideration of adopting a certification of gifts that are fundable through the Texas Research Incentive Program for the Emerging Research Universities. 7D, consideration of adopting the evaluation of the Nursing Shortage Reduction Program report, General Appropriations Act, House Bill 1, Article 3, Section 28G, 86 Legislature. 7E, consideration of adopting the report on the Legislature of High School Individual Graduation Committee graduates, Texas Education Code, Section 28.02591. 7F, review of facilities projects that were submitted to the coordinating board. 7G, consideration of adopting the report on student financial aid in Texas higher education, fiscal year 2019, General Appropriations Act, House Bill 1, Article 3, Section 25, 86, Texas Legislature. 7H, consideration of adopting staff recommendations of the board relating to the approval of the nominated members of the Financial Aid Advisory Committee. 9B, consideration of adopting a report on the access to higher education for persons with intellectual and developmental disabilities, Texas Education Code, Section 61.06641. 9C, consideration of adopting the report on the recruitment of persons with intellectual and developmental disabilities at institutions of higher education, Texas Education Code, Section 61.06664. 9D, consideration of adopting the report on the effectiveness of the Advised Texas Program, General Appropriations Act, House Bill 1, Article 3, Section 51, 86 Legislature. 9E, consideration of adopting the Graduate Medical Education Report and of opportunities for graduates of Texas medical schools to enter residency programs in Texas, Texas Education Code, Section 61.06661B. 9F, consideration of adopting the Aerospace and Aviation Report, Government Code, Section 481.0062D2. 9G, consideration of adopting the study and report on core curriculum, Senate Bill 25, 86 Legislature, regular session, Texas Education Code, Section 61.8221. 9H, consideration of adopting the Texas General Academic Institutions Increasing Successful Community College Transfer Report, General Appropriations Act, House Bill 1, Article 3, Section 49, 86 Legislature, regular session. 9I, consideration of adopting the Texas application for State Financial Aid Advisory Committee report set out in the Texas Education Code, Section 61.7762. 9J, consideration of adopting the study regarding streamlining physician licensing requirements for advanced practice registered nurses, Texas Education Code, Section 61.06693. 9K1, consideration of adopting the request of a new degree program at the University of Texas at Arlington, Bachelor of Science in Data Science. 9K2, consideration of adopting the request for a degree program at the University of Texas at Austin, Bachelor of Science and Bachelor of Arts in Informatics. 9N, consideration of approving a request to contract with a higher education artificial intelligence vendor for the virtual advising project. 9O, report on institutional requests acted on by the commissioner or assistant commissioner since the last board meeting. 10B, reports on grants and contracts. 10C, consideration of adopting a resolution authorizing the issuance of state of Texas college student loan bonds in one or more series, and delegation of the authority for the administration approval of the activities necessary to complete the sale of the private activity bonds. Members, are there any agenda items anyone wants to remove from the consent calendar? Well, at this time, I'd like to remove agenda item 9J, consideration of adopting the study regarding streamlining physician licensing requirements for advanced practice registered nurses. Texas Education Code, Section 61.06693. Do I have a motion for the non-rule consent calendar as amended?
So moved.
Yeah. Let me just go back. Motion by Mr. Wilson, second by Mr. Torn. Any discussion? Anyway, members, when I call your name, please state whether you're voting for or against. Mr. Anwar?
For.
Mr. Campbell?
For.
Dr. Frias?
For.
Ms. Swartz?
For.
Mr. Torn?
For.
Ms. Williams? That's a big thumbs up there. And Mr. Wilson?
For.
And I vote for as well. Motion passes. Members, the next items on the consent calendar are board rules. The rules placed on the consent calendar are those either technical in nature, conforming, or implement non-controversial policies around which there is a consensus. Our general counsel is here to provide a brief overview of the rule consent calendar. Ms. Nicole Bunker Henderson. So, Nicole?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman Stedman. Members, as you noted this morning, we've broken down the consent calendar a little bit differently, where we have the consent non-rule items and then the consent rule items. And yesterday, as you all noted and experienced, we removed the TSI rules from the consent items where they're originally placed. So at the invitation of the chairman, I'd like to just talk a little bit more about the rules. So as a brief overview, rules have the force and effect of law. They are also subject to very strict statutory requirements in terms of both the process but also the substance of the preambles. And so this agency on the back end, before it comes to you, undertakes a significant amount of work, both on the policy vetting side and then also on the technical side, to ensure that those rules both conform to statute and fall within the agency's authority to adopt, so that I can certify them for you all. So the rules that you're going to see on the consent calendar, just as a point of clarification, as the chairman mentioned, are those that either have minor technical edits to the rules. So, for example, extending the time period that an advisory committee is in effect is in a rule. So that will be on the consent item. Or they're conforming. So there's many rules that simply implement legislation, and when the legislation is repealed or amended, then that necessitates making a conforming change to the rules. And so those are not really areas in which the agency is acting in a policy-making role. It's really just doing what the legislature told us to do and making sure our rules conform. And then on the consent item calendar, you will also see rules that are sort of minor policy tweaks. So, for example, on today, there's quite a few on the financial aid rules. And so some of those are changing definitions to better align with federal law, or removing, kind of barriers to participation, or making clarifications in definitions. So That's kind of the consent rules. So the rules that you're not going to see on consent and that are going to come to the board for the regular agenda are those that really implement more significant policy considerations, and that beyond having the opportunity to look at those, in your board packet and review those prior to adoption of the consent calendar, we're putting before the board for your full vetting and consideration and deliberation. And so those will be major policy choices. They'll also be, rules that attract a number of comments, like the TSI rules did yesterday, or those that might have a fiscal impact to the regulated communities or the state. So if you have any questions, please never hesitate to ask. The staff is here to provide you with substantive input, or I'm here to answer questions about technical issues or legal issues. And just as a reminder, you can always remove items for rules from consent if you want to.
Yeah, I think this is an important distinction. First, separating the consent calendar into non-rule and rules, and then sort of grouping in the consent calendar the rules that really are sort of I-dotting and T-crossing to conform to statutes and don't really have the effective policy. The problem I guess I've had in the past, and Nicole and I have had discussions about this, is when you lump all the rules together, it's somehow hard to figure out, okay, well, what is important? I mean, maybe they're all important legally, but what really has either policy or economic impact? Because a lot of these rules, when you read them, I mean, a number of them really affect what these institutions and higher education partners receive, I mean, in terms of money. And so to separate that out, I think, is really important. And what I really ask Nicole to do is give the board a sense of proportion. In other words, okay, so what is really important? What do we really have to... Can you hear me? Just kind of wave if you can. Okay, good.
We can hear you.
All right. Looks like we're back up. Fortunately, Mary had come up with that technical difficulties sign, so hopefully everybody understood that. And just stand by. But I'm going to have to reread these rules. So let's go back to the members. The rules on consent are the following. 7I1, consideration of adopting proposed amendments to Chapter 22, Subchapter A, Section 22.11 of Board Rules concerning general provisions. 7I2, consideration of adopting proposed amendments to Chapter 22, Subchapter B, Section 22.28 of Board Rules concerning provisions for the Tuition Equalization Grant Program. 7I3, consideration of adopting the proposed repeal of Chapter 22, Subchapter L, Sections 22.232, 22.235, 22.238, 22.240, and 22.242 of the Board Rules and amendments to Sections 22.225 through 22.231, 22.233, 22.234, and 22.241 of Board Rules concerning the Towards Excellence Access and Success Grant Program. By the way, it's easier the second time around. The 7I4, consideration of proposed amendments to Chapter 22, Subchapter M, Section 22.261 of Board Rules concerning the Texas Educational Opportunity Grant Program. 7I5, consideration of adopting the proposed repeal of Subchapter 22, Subchapter Q, Sections 22.331 to 22.336, and 22.342 to 22.344 of Board Rules and amendments to Chapter 22, Subchapter Q, Sections 22.329, 22.330, 22.339, and 22.341 concerning the Texas Be On Time Loan Program. 7I6, consideration of adopting proposed amendments to Chapter 23, Subchapter C, Sections 23.65 to 23.67 of Board Rules concerning the Physician Education Loan Repayment Program. 7I7, consideration of adopting proposed amendments to Chapter 23, Subchapter H, Sections 22.2211 and Section 23.214 of Board Rules concerning the Peace Officer Loan Repayment Assistance Program. 9P1, consideration of adopting proposed amendment to Subchapter 1, Subchapter T, to Chapter 1, Subchapter T, Section 1.223 of Board Rules concerning the Workforce Education Course Manual Advisory Committee. 9P2, consideration of adopting proposed amendments to Chapter 4, Subchapter S, Section 4.314 of Board Rules concerning the approval for participation in the State Authorization Reciprocity Agreement for Public Institutions of Higher Education. 9P3, consideration of adopting the proposed amendments to Chapter 7, Subchapter B, Section 7.54 of Board Rules concerning the approval for participation in the State Authorization Reciprocity Agreement or private or independent institutions of higher education and private post-secondary educational institutions. 9P4, consideration of adopting proposed amendments to Chapter 4, Subchapter C, Sections 4.56, 4.57, and 4.62 of Board Rules concerning the Texas Success Initiative. Members, does anybody want to remove any of these rule items from the consent calendar? At this time, I would like to remove Agenda Item 9P4, consideration of adopting the proposed amendments to Chapter 4, Subchapter C, Sections 4.56, 4.57, and 4.62 from the consent agenda. Members, do you have any objections?
No.
Hearing none, do I have a motion for the approval of the rule consent calendar?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
this is Fred Farias. You did a great job with all those. I just noticed on 7I3, in consideration of adopting the proposed repeal of Chapter 22, Subchapter L, sections, you mentioned 22.38 and then 22.40, but it should have been 22.38 through 22.24, which means we would have left out 22.39, I believe. I happen to have a copy of it, the backup copy, so just want to make sure we include 22.39 as well on that repeal.
I see. Yes, I did not see that in my list. So anyway, ever vigilant, our vice chair has corrected important omissions. So thank you, Dr. Farias. Okay, so anyway, with that addition in, let's see, section, that's 7I3.
Correct.
Do I have a motion to approve the rule consent calendar as amended?
So moved. Fred Farias.
Motion by Dr. Farias. Second by Mr. Anwar. Members, when I call your name, please state whether you are voting for or against. Mr. Anwar?
Aye.
Mr. Campbell?
For.
Dr. Farias?
For.
Ms. Swartz?
4.
Mr. Torn?
For.
Ms. Williams? Ms. Williams? Yeah. Okay, so got a thumbs up. And then Mr. Wilson?
For.
And I vote for as well. Motion passes. Let's see. The next item on the agenda is the major policy discussion, but Agenda Item 5A and B, we'll be taking these agenda items out of turn, and we'll hear them following Agenda Item 7, which is matters relating to the Committee on Innovation, Data, and Educational Analytics. I think it flows better there. Our next section is matters relating to the full board. Agenda Item 6A is consideration and possible approval of the board to enter into an interagency agreement with the University of Texas at Austin to transfer the Texas OnCourse program to the Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board. Melissa Henderson, Associate Commissioner, will present this item and be available to answer questions. Ms. Henderson?
Thank you, Chairman Stedman. Good morning, members. From our discussion at the special call board meeting in September, many of you are familiar with Texas OnCourse, as the Commissioner mentioned earlier, a statewide initiative founded by Commissioner Keller in his previous role at UT Austin with support from the Texas legislature and in partnership with Governor Abbott's Tri-Agency Initiative. Launched in 2017, Texas OnCourse's mission is to equip all Texas students for an educational and professional future that unlocks their potential. Texas OnCourse works closely with the coordinating board to develop online training for post-secondary advisors, with the Texas Education Agency on college readiness and advising resources for secondary educators and students, and with the Texas Workforce Commission to curate advising resources about career opportunities. Today, as the commissioner mentioned, more than 15,000 college and career advisors across the state participate in training through the Texas OnCourse Digital Academy, and students and families across the state can access a growing library of free online college and career planning resources. Additionally, as you know, in July, Governor Abbott and legislative leadership announced a commitment of $175 million in federal governor's emergency education relief funds to the coordinating board. The majority of these funds, as you heard earlier, are being used to provide financial aid to students and workers impacted by the COVID-19 crisis. The remaining funds are being used to improve the quality of online teaching and learning in higher education institutions, to strengthen the state's educational and workforce data infrastructure, and to provide better online advising tools. Texas OnCourse will play an important role in several of these state initiatives with new online resources and tools to improve the quality of college and career advising across a broader spectrum of student and state needs, from secondary students to college and university students to adult learners. As part of this exciting new phase of work, Texas OnCourse will transfer operations from UT Austin to the Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board upon approval of the interagency contract before you today, with the team of 30 individuals transitioning over in January of 2021. The IAC would be in place through August 31st, 2021, and the associated funding would be $3 million minus the value of any subsequent agreements necessary to carry out the provisions of the IAC. This transition to the coordinating board in partnership with the Texas Higher Education Foundation will allow the program to operate more nimbly and efficiently throughout Texas in an agency whose mission is closely aligned with the Texas OnCourse mission of equipping all Texas students for an educational and professional future. Texas OnCourse will work closely with multiple coordinating board projects and initiatives, including financial aid, college readiness and success, data analytics, and innovation. While UT will remain an important partner in the initiative, this transfer will enable Texas OnCourse to work even more closely with tri-agency initiatives and partner with a broader range of post-secondary institutions across the state. In particular, the transfer to the coordinating board will accelerate the adoption and use of Texas OnCourse resources and tools, not only in post-secondary institutions, but also through partnerships with local workforce boards across the state. Ultimately, working through the coordinating board and in partnership with the foundation will allow Texas OnCourse to serve many more educators, advisors, and students and families, offering vital support during a time when students and families are experiencing significant need. We look forward to working with the Texas OnCourse team and welcoming them to the Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board. We are asking the board to approve the IAC with UT Austin and authorize the commissioner to enter into any subsequent agreements necessary to carry out the provisions of the IAC. With that, General Counsel Nicole Bunker Henderson and I are available to answer any questions.
Members, any questions? Okay, so just, I've heard it, but I don't have it clear in my mind. Okay, two issues. One is who pays for what, and two, how does this relate to Advise Texas?
So
Nicole, do you want to?
I can weigh in, Melissa. So for context, one of the initiatives that the coordinating board is taking the lead on for the tri-agency initiative is college and career advising. So what we envision is high-quality college and career advising from secondary schools through colleges and universities and into the workforce. So OnCourse ends up being an important part of the mix. It's got two major components of its work right now. So it's got the OnCourse Academy that Melissa mentioned that's just-in-time competency-based training for advisors. It's primarily used by secondary advisors today. So they get just-in-time training in almost every aspect of college and career advising, from helping students fill out the FAFSA to helping students apply to military academies. Now, in
So excuse me, but that's like Advise Texas, focused on secondary, high school students.
Focused on secondary students, right? And the coordinating board had already started to work with OnCourse in developing modules for post-secondary advisors as well. So adapting some of that content so that college advisors could use some of the same materials. And then what we're proposing and planning to work on in partnership with the Workforce Commission is carrying that work over into also having the training materials available for career coaches and other advisors available in the local workforce boards. So we'll be able to have more consistent, high-quality advising. Now, Advise Texas is in a similar space where it has been focused on the peer-to-peer advising, in particular high schools. We've recently expanded the scope of Advise Texas, where we're standing up a cohort of virtual advisors who are going to be available to advise students across the state, and we're going to leverage the ADV chatbot as a resource so that students beyond those high schools that have typically had the Advise Texas resources available will be able to benefit from Advise Texas. So these are complementary efforts. So there's the training and support infrastructure through OnCourse, and then some of that direct advising through Advise Texas and through the virtual cohort, and then the technology-based tools available through ADV and some of the new tools we're standing up and other initiatives, as well as some of the resources that OnCourse has already curated that are student-facing resources. So as we're working through how these are sitting together, that's going to be one of the major strands of work in our strategic planning over the next several months, is figuring out how which pieces we're going to need to expand, which pieces where we've got some we might have some redundancy, and we can consolidate our efforts.
Yeah. Well, okay. So it's a little bit fluid and sort of evolving, but I tell you, yeah, don't please keep us up to date, and maybe as pictures would be helpful, because it's kind of confusing. One's peer-to-peer, one's like career and all this stuff. But as it evolves, because it's really important. If you recall yesterday at the update in the 6530 Texas plan, 6530 Texas, that high school to college direct enrollment it really underpins that whole goal. And this is a big piece of trying to help solve that problem. Second question is, okay, so who pays for it?
So this is a state initiative. So there's appropriated funds available that were appropriated to UT Austin for Texas OnCourse. So through the interagency agreement, funds will be transferred from UT Austin to the coordinating board.
On a continuing basis.
So we've requested in our legislative appropriations request, and UT Austin has also requested that OnCourse be formally transferred to the coordinating board starting in the next biennium. So the agreement is to finish out this biennium and go ahead and effect the transition of the program to the coordinating board. The agreement could be renewed beyond this fiscal year, but both UT and the coordinating board have formally requested the transfer of the program and the funding.
Gotcha. Yeah, Dr. Frias, can you hear?
I can hear you, but the screen is frozen.
Oh, so you can't see me? That's actually kind of a positive. But anyway, so do we need the screen or?
We can continue via audio as long as the feed remains.
Okay, well, I'd like to move on. If as long as you guys can hear us, I think we can do it. Our general counsel says we can't. So, okay. So anyway, to me, this is really important. I mean, because you're beefing up Advise Texas, and as we talked about or just mentioned, is that pipeline direct enrollment from high school to college is really critical to get students and to attain our 60 by 30 Texas goal. So, anyway, any other questions? So hearing none, do I have a motion to enter into an interagency agreement with the University of Texas at Austin to transfer the Texas OnCourse program to the Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board and authorize the commissioner to enter into any other agreements necessary to effect this transfer?
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Torn,
Second.
second by Mr. Anwar. Members, when I call your name, please state whether you're voting for or against. Mr. Anwar?
For.
Mr. Campbell?
For.
Dr. Padillas?
For.
Ms. Swartz?
For.
Mr. Torn?
For.
Ms. Williams?
For.
Look, she came.
Mr. Wilson?
For.
I'm voting for. Motion passes. Let's see, agenda item 6B is acceptance of gifts and donations to the board. Members, gifts and donations are listed in the blue page in your materials. Nicole Bunker Henderson, General Counsel, is available for questions. And bottom line, this is just, it's really from the higher. Just give us an overview what's happening, where these gifts kind of came to the Higher Education Foundation and then to the coordinating board.
Yes, sir. So the gifts, as you noted, result from donations that are provided to the Higher Education Foundation, and then they come to, with the exception of the College Advising Corps, which is a direct to the coordinating board gift. The others come in the form of in-kind goods and services of contracts. So the funds flow to the foundation then contracts for services that it provides in donation to the agency. The statute simply requires that you all, as the board, formally accept gifts to the agency.
Fairly straightforward. Any questions? Hearing none, do I have a motion to approve the acceptance of gifts and donations as listed?
So moved. Donna.
Okay, motion by Ms. Williams, second by Mr. Wilson. Discussion. Members, when I call your name, please state whether you're voting for or against. Mr. Anwar?
For.
Mr. Campbell?
For.
Dr. Padillas?
For.
Ms. Swartz?
For.
Mr. Torn?
For.
William?
For.
Mr. Wilson?
For.
And I vote for as well. The motion passes. Agenda item 6C is consideration of renewing the emergency rule 1.15B, authorizing the Commissioner of Higher Education to make adjustments to reporting requirements pertaining to the formula funding as necessary to assist institutions of higher education in responding to the COVID-19 pandemic or other disasters with an effective date of December 24, 2020 for a period of 60 days. Emily Cormier, Assistant Commissioner for Funding, will present this item and is available for questions. Emily?
Good morning, Chairman and members of the board. This item relates to the extension of the emergency rule for your consideration. So as you might recall, in August, the board met in a special called meeting to adopt this emergency rule to provide the commissioner with the ability to modify rules regarding the reporting of courses for formula funding during times of disaster in Texas. This rule was brought forward to address an issue raised by institutions due to COVID-19 relating to the reporting of online courses and their eligibility to receive formula funding. And since that meeting, the commissioner has used this emergency rule to grant one modification relating to the reporting of those courses. Emergency rules are effective for 120 days and then can be renewed for another 60 days. This approval will extend the emergency rule by 60 days and allow this modification to remain in effect for the reporting of courses in the spring 2021 semester, assuming that a disaster declaration pertaining to COVID-19 remains in effect for Texas. That concludes my remarks, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Any questions? Hearing none, do I have a motion to renew the emergency rule section 1.1B for a period of 60 days beyond its current expiration date?
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Torn,
Second.
second by Mr. Anwar. Members, when I call your name, please state whether you're voting for or against. Mr. Anwar?
For.
Mr. Campbell?
For.
Dr. Frias?
For. And Mr. Chairman, by the way, you're now back live. We can see you.
Oh, gosh. Sorry. Okay. Right. Anyway, Ms. Swartz?
4.
Mr. Torn? 4. Ms. Williams?
4.
Mr. Wilson?
4.
And I vote 4 as well. Motion passes. Agenda item 7 is matters relating to the Committee on Innovation, Data, and Educational Analytics, chaired by Javed Anwar. Javed, are you?
Yes. Let me find the script, please. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Javed Anwar. Agenda item 7A is a committee chair's meeting overview. Thank you for joining us for matters relating to the Committee on Innovation, Data, and Educational Analysis. Agenda item 7B is consideration of approval of 60 by 30 Texas Progress Report. This report was presented yesterday by committee at the committee meeting. Dr. Julie Eklund, Assistant Commissioner for Strategic Planning, is available to answer any question. Are there any questions about approval of the report? Any questions, please? None, however. So do I have a motion to approve? And second, please.
Yes, so moved. Welcome, Wilson.
Welcome, Wilson, and then approve, please. Second by.
Emma Schwartz will second.
Thank you. I'm going to call everybody's name and please say for or against. Cody Campbell.
4.
Fred Frias.
4.
I guess Ricky Raven is not here. So Emma Schwartz.
4.
Stuart Stedman. 4. Sam Tone.
4.
Donna Williams.
4.
Welcome, Wilson.
4.
I vote here for. Is there anybody against it? If not, the motion passes. Agenda 7C through 7I were approved at the consent calendar. That concludes our portion of the meeting.
Okay, thank you, Javed. The next item, and anyway, I'm not sure why we went in that particular order, but anyway, the next item is the major policy discussion. We'll return to agenda item 5. Agenda item 5A is appointment of the 60 by 30 Texas Refresh Steering Committee. This is an information item only. Basically, I formed a steering committee to study the refinement of 60 by 30 Texas, the strategic plan for higher education in Texas. And so I appointed Mr. Donna Williams, Mr. Welcome Wilson, Dr. Fred Frias, and myself to serve on this ad hoc committee. And we actually the committee actually includes. This is not part of our, my appointment, but it's a partnership really with the Texas Higher Education Foundation. So there are 4 members of the foundation that are on that committee. So 8 of us total. Neil Adams, chairman of the Higher Education Foundation. Woody Hunt, who was actually part of the effort to craft 60 by 30 Texas. I think he was the chairman of that effort. Fred Heldenveld, who was also part of that effort, and Daryl Heath, who is a board member of the Texas Higher Education Foundation. Anyway, so I guess I've kind of just covered it. Melissa is available to answer any questions. Do you have any questions? And let me just say that I think with the 60 by 30 Texas refresh, I think it's appropriate. But not only, I think it's been 5 years since the 60 by 30 Texas strategic plan had been adopted by this board, and I think, things have changed, certainly, and so we need to just look at it and see if it comports with really the direction that higher education needs to take in Texas. And then, of course, there's a new commissioner with Dr. Keller, and then this COVID-19 crisis. So I think all of that combined, it makes it really important to look at our strategic plan going forward. So you'll have plenty of updates in the future on that. Agenda item 5B is the major policy discussion. A major policy discussion is topics of interest where staff, policy experts, and stakeholders provide coordinating board members with information on higher education policy matters or initiatives that have the potential to impact Texas statewide. The major policy discussion for this meeting will focus on the 60 by 30 Texas update and refinement. Dr. Harrison Keller, Commissioner of Higher Education, and Melissa Henderson, Associate Commissioner, will present this item and be available for questions. Commissioner?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, as I mentioned in my opening remarks, a year ago when I stepped into the role as Commissioner, we'd already started talking about some aspects of our 60 by 30 Texas plan that might need to be revisited. So we'd been with the plan for a few years, and already at the time there were a few issues where it had become apparent that we might want to consider revisiting the plan. So the plan as it currently exists especially focuses on the educational attainment of our younger working population. So the central attainment goal is that we would have 60% of our young working population ages 25 to 34 to achieve some kind of post-secondary credential by 2030. And so we talked about how we might need more attention to a broader range of our population because we have a number of older workers who are going to need to upskill and reskill for Texas to be able to be competitive in the national and global economies. Our current 60 by 30 plan also promotes the attainment of any kind of post-secondary credential in a way that's fairly generic. So there's in the overall educational attainment goals and completion goals, it doesn't differentiate about the kinds of degrees, the kinds of certificates or workforce credentials that might be especially important. And then finally, unlike the Closing the Gaps plan, 60 by 30 Texas didn't include any attention to the research and development mission of our universities, which are critical for expanding opportunity and driving economic development. Now that was all pre-COVID, and to pick up on the chairman's comments, I think it's exactly right that the global pandemic has increased the urgency for us to revisit our higher education goals. We have more than 3.6 million Texans who filed for unemployment since mid-March. And what we see happening in Texas and across the nation, around the world, is that this disruption is accelerating changes that we already saw underway in the economy and also introducing new challenges. So we're experiencing these tectonic shifts in our workforce needs and in our labor market. And it's going to be more important than ever for us to include adult learners in our higher education goals and to emphasize the kind of high-value credentials that are going to be especially important for individuals, for our communities, and for our state in driving economic recovery and ensuring our competitiveness into the future. Also, the pandemic has had a disproportionate impact on certain populations, especially women, Black Texans, Hispanic Texans, Texans who are low income, and people who are living in rural areas. So many of these groups are suffering job losses that are disproportionately high. Finally, the importance of research and development is I think, on a lot of folks' minds now, as we're counting on our university's research missions to help us navigate this crisis. And our institutions across the state have risen to the challenges of the pandemic by developing new multidisciplinary solutions to our public health challenges, researching new vaccines, creating new air filters to trap and eliminate coronavirus, and even inventing new, more cost-effective ventilators. So we've seen our colleges and our universities rise to the challenge, and it's a good time for us to talk about not just what our immediate challenges are, but how we're going to need to rely on our research and development mission going forward. So finally, I'd like to emphasize one point is that while the idea is that we want to revisit, refine our goals, the intent is in no way to dilute our higher education goals. So we might expect that we would add to existing measures or metrics, but the idea is not that we want to back off of our higher education goals, but just that we want to be more focused and we want to move with due speed so that we can help inform the upcoming policy conversations in the legislative session, and also so that we can inform our broader discussions within the coordinating board and with our higher education institutions to help inform and guide decisions, particularly in the kind of resource-constrained, challenging circumstances we face now. So I'll turn it over to Melissa to talk about the timeline that we've developed and recommended for the working group and the various deliverables.
Thank you, Commissioner. So we have 3 anticipated deliverables for this work. The first deliverable is an initial organizational framework capturing our vision and laying the foundation for refined goals, and that's what we're going to be sharing with you today. Our next step will be a high-level vision document to capture that work and start to plug the agency's current initiatives into the framework. We expect this to be completed by December 2020. Finally, we expect to have refined goals ready to bring back before the board by mid-2021. This will include the framework, goals, and metrics, and will be informed by a thorough stakeholder engagement process across multiple groups and constituencies. To do this work, we have engaged and will be engaging many constituencies. First, as you know, we've established a steering committee, the appointment of which you just heard the chairman describe, made up of members representing the coordinating board and the Texas Higher Education Foundation board. These members have provided invaluable historical context and future direction to this work and will continue to do so over the course of the year. Internally within the agency, we've established working groups that will allow us to draw both on agency leadership and subject matter expertise existing within the organization. Finally, we're developing an extensive stakeholder engagement plan, and we'll be drawing on a broad swath of stakeholders across the state, drawing on existing dialogue with educational institutions and incorporating critical voices from students, employers, and other constituencies across the state. To support all of this work, we are drawing on expertise very generously provided by external partners, including the Lumina Foundation, HCM strategists, and Minerva Consulting. So the proposed framework would reorganize the existing goals and potentially add new goals within 3 overarching future-facing priorities: advancing economic resiliency and building a talent-strong Texas to propel continued growth of the economy and position the state to successfully rebound from economic challenges. Second, expanding opportunities and ensuring opportunities for economic mobility for every Texan. And finally, innovate for tomorrow's Texas, harnessing innovation to create a more vibrant future for Texas and its residents. Moving forward, we will be continuing the work of developing our deliverables and executing the stakeholder engagement plan over the coming months into 2021. And with that, that concludes my remarks, and the Commissioner and I are available for any questions.
Yeah, let me just comment, and I've sent this email around, but I think first in the Wall Street Journal, and then I got correspondence with an economist that I get on his list. When you look at the job numbers, the job losses because of the pandemic starting in March, and you look at the recovery of those jobs, and you break it down with, the first graph I saw was just college degree or higher. I mean, the college degree or higher population, this is U.S. data, we need to look, of course, at Texas as well. I mean, they almost recovered. So think about that again. I mean, in other words, that you had this huge drop, incredible drop in unemployment, and for those with a college degree or higher, they're almost back to the employment levels they were in March, which was very high. And then I got another graph because, the question is, okay, well, what, college and above, that, that's good. That's a statement for a college. But what about some college and no degree? Well, that's about kind of in between. The people that their recovery has not been as good as the college or above, but they've come up as kind of halfway. Unfortunately, the ones with only high school or no high school really have not recovered at all. And that's part of, you look at the underpinning of 60 by 30 Texas and workforce development and not only for corporations but also for just advancing the prosperity of the citizens of Texas. It is really critical stuff. And I think for whatever reason, this is my editorial comment, 60 by 30 Texas, the plan, possibly even the name, again, this is just speaking for myself, doesn't quite motivate the way it should. Because when you look at those employment numbers and what the value of higher education is, it is unbelievably compelling. And that's kind of, to me, the underpinning of where this effort, the refresh, will go. And I think the research mission, again, this is my editorial comments, it's not only COVID vaccine and products that help with the pandemic, but you're training people. You're creating people to go out in the workforce, whether they go out in the workforce as a PhD or master's in English literature or something. That those people will contribute, and it's all part of that graph that I was trying to describe. That you have that training, you can learn to adapt, and you become a lifelong learner. It's incredibly important, and we need to get our strategic plan to be more of a perhaps a motivational document than what it has in the past. Is that fair, Commissioner?
I would agree, Mr. Chairman. I think the data is pretty compelling. I mean, it was clear before COVID hit us that jobs follow skills. We saw that coming out of the Great Recession, where the recovery was much faster for displaced workers who had post-secondary credentials. And we saw the vast majority of the net new jobs, I think 85% of the net new jobs that were created in the wake of the Great Recession went to folks who at least had some college or some kind of post-secondary credential. There was almost no recovery for Texans that didn't have a post-secondary credential. Of course, now what the scale of the disruption we're experiencing in our economy is much greater. And what we're seeing in Texas and across the nation is that it's accelerating these changes in the economy, and the premium that goes with a post-secondary credential is increasing rapidly. And so we do need to be much more nimble and more focused in how we think about what we're going to do to upskill and reskill our Texas workforce.
And as we talked about yesterday, I guess it was in the IDEA committee, we were really talking about high school to college direct. One of the commissioner's big focus points is some college and no degree. Most likely, people that are beyond our current strategic plans, 25 to 34-year-old, and so, but there's a marketing issue that we're not doing a good job of, in my opinion, making the case that, look, it's a really good investment. And so whether you're high school to college direct, or whether you've got some college and no degree and 40 years old, I think what the commissioner's part of the commissioner's strategy for this agency is to get the data, that will make these kind of returns on investment compelling. And so it's very, very exciting. I mean, to be a part of this kind of refresh effort, because I think it's really important, and it's important not only for higher education, but it's important for the state of Texas. So any questions?
Yeah, I have a comment. I think we have a unique opportunity in Texas because of the business climate. And the fact of the matter is, we're rated the #1 state in the nation to do business. And so I think it's going to be critically important that we recognize the opportunity with all of the new industries and companies that are coming into Texas to be able to make sure we translate a training certificate or a degree to something that is relational to those opportunities that are going to exist. And I think we just have a tremendous opportunity in Texas for really raising the level of all of our citizens' opportunity to earn a living because of the economy and the business environment that's being created in the state, and I think will continue to be created.
Yeah, and that's absolutely right. And yet, there is this, I mentioned this yesterday, the chicken and egg problem. In other words, yes, the business climate is favorable. Companies want to come here, but if we don't have the workforce, you know, I mean, just at the beginning, that's going to be a consideration for companies maybe to look elsewhere. But that's a great point.
Mr. Chairman, I have a couple comments. Yeah, also, you mentioned marketing, and I do think that we need to consider finding funding to have a mass marketing campaign aimed at not only our youth that are going through the education pipeline, but also their parents, to help them understand the impact that COVID had on these different groups. It's kind of, you know, what came to my mind was the war on drugs, right? There was a very consistent message to demonstrate the problems that drugs had. And I think that we need that similar kind of statewide messaging that really talks about what the economic opportunities are and what kids need to do to get to achieve those economic opportunities. And I just haven't seen a really powerful and consistent and kind of long-term marketing strategy aimed at this kind of effort.
Yeah, I would agree. So Melissa, I mean, so that's part of, you know, we've hired all these consultants, and as the commissioner knows, I'm skeptical about the value of consultants, although they can be incredibly valuable. But isn't part of their mission in this effort a marketing mission?
Yes, so Minerva Consulting is a communications firm, and we'll definitely be looking at the messaging components of this and thinking through what are the messages that resonate with what populations, et cetera.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, but that's a great point, because I think there's something missing, and I'm not sure what it is. With 60 by 30 Texas, it's I think partly a lot of it is marketing, and maybe it's an absence of data. But I've been frustrated personally that the policymakers and really at all levels of higher institution don't talk about it as a central focus to what they're doing. And I think you know, the commissioner, certainly myself, want to change that. Mr. Anwar, do you have a?
Thank you. I think so. We ought to get the parents involved from very like 3rd or 4th grade, and the students too, that what advantage they have if they get better education and they can earn a better living, and that's part of education. And you know, Texas pretty soon will have 50% other minorities, and I tend to, in our area, Midland, Odessa area, there's so many jobs available. Kid out of high school can make $15 to $20 an hour driving a truck. So they'd have no incentive to go to any college or anything. But when the economy slows down, these guys are unemployed. And that's the most important emphasis should be given, that yes, you can earn a lot of money, up to $80K per year, but what happens if things slow down? And, you know, it's marketing from early stages of kids' life, along with their parents have to be involved. Because, you know, like I did with my kids, you know, work with them when they were like 6th, 7th grade from their own, you know.
Yeah, that's a good point. And well, one of the things it's really exciting to work with, Commissioner Keller and sort of his vision for doing all this. The Advise Texas, which is really focused on high schools, right? And then the Texas OnCourse, which, we'll hear more about how those two get integrated. But, Javid has a pretty good point that sort of Emma, I mean, that there's a marketing pitch that could go even down into, elementary school, and maybe it's not directed at the kids, but directed at parents. So this whole sort of ecosystem that we are trying to create here, I think is critical for the future of the state of Texas, and very, very exciting to be a part of.
So one of the things, just to weigh in and pick up on an earlier point that Ms. Schwartz made and Melissa made, is that historically we haven't really had an upskilling strategy for the state. And when we were first talking about the potential of revisiting the 60 by 30 plan, it was in a context when we had historic low unemployment, 4% unemployment. Now it's a very different kind of conversation, and so we are able to, with some of this external support, do some research and figure out, well, what are the barriers, what are the kinds of messages that resonate, and one of the things that we need to move away from in terms of marketing is just counting on each individual college to do their own marketing to make to their local communities. And I think that's been one of the pieces that's been missing, because individual students or families might encounter those messages, or folks will go to Google and they'll search for different kinds of opportunities that are available. But we haven't really had a concerted effort to get messages out there about, here are the kind of programs that are available, here's what kind of opportunities that creates for you, for your family, here's how it connects to job opportunities and career pathways, and here are resources you can tap into. There's financial aid that the board we just put the RFA out yesterday, right? There's financial aid that's available this next spring that folks are going to be able to tap into to re-enroll, and those, even a short-term workforce credential that's a few months long, can make a huge difference for folks being able to get back into the workforce, back on their feet, maybe on a new career pathway that is going to hook up with these new kinds of job opportunities that are available. But as a state, we haven't really had that kind of coordinated strategy. So part of what's kind of the overarching idea here is that it's both revisiting, refining our goals, but also working in new kinds of partnerships with the Texas Workforce Commission and across our institutions, so we can make these opportunities more visible and more accessible for Texans from secondary schools all the way into adult learners. That's something that Texas as a state has not done before.
Yeah, to just talk briefly about the effort, it's really a GradTex 2.0 kind of effort in Harris County, and how you're communicating both the Greater Houston Partnership as well as the institutions there. Just talk about that, because I think it's part of what you're saying.
So the agency had an initiative called the GradTex that was focused on the some college and no credential population before I arrived as commissioner, and there were two major parts to that. One part was mining the data to try to identify students who were in striking distance of finishing credential, and the second part was there was a community of practice of about 5 institutions, but the underlying assumption was that institutions would re-enroll students that had stopped out from that institution. And so we rebooted this initiative, and it started working on this in partnership with Greater Houston Partnership and higher education institutions in Greater Houston. Now, Greater Houston is an interesting laboratory to work on these issues for a couple of reasons. One is that American Community Survey data that suggests we could have nearly 4 million Texans with some college and no credential. There could be about 1 million of them just in the Greater Houston region. Greater Houston has a strong tradition of cooperation, strong backbone organization in the Greater Houston Partnership, and also among the higher education leaders in the Greater Houston region. They've formed an alliance called Houston GPS, which is not just the executives getting together, but also doing that hard articulation work where folks roll up their sleeves and make sure that the curriculum can be aligned from what's happening at Lone Star to what happens at U of H, for example. And then there's also philanthropy in Houston. Now, we'd started working on a reboot of the GradTex initiative that we've been calling GradTex 2.0. It's more of a comprehensive regional approach. So the idea is instead of counting on individual institutions to re-enroll folks, we would have a central intake, do some real marketing research, develop and test messages, try to drive traffic to an intake portal, and then help folks identify and be connected with the programs that would hook up with their interests. So you could go to the website, answer a few questions, and identify, like, here's a program at San Jac, or here's a program at U of H downtown that might be a good fit for you, and we could engineer a warm handoff to that institution so they can do the follow-up, instead of counting on folks to be able to just find the institutions and the programs on their own. Now, this was work that we already had underway, but now, as COVID has hit, we've not taken our foot off the gas, and if anything, this has let us go a little faster in how we've put together the request for applications around reskilling and upskilling that was just released yesterday. In particular, some of the technical analyses that we commissioned as part of GradTex 2.0 have been very important. We're working with Burning Glass Technologies that mines data on online job postings, and also with the Workforce of the Future initiative at the Brookings Institution to help identify who's been most heavily impacted by COVID, what do we know about their skills, what do we know about the kind of occupations they've come out of, and what do we know about the way the workforce needs seem to be emerging, and what does that tell us about the kinds of reskilling pathways that are going to be most productive for those individuals, for the communities, for the state. The idea is that intelligence, that kind of data that we'll be able to generate, not just as in one-off analyses, but as we stand up our new data infrastructure more in an ongoing way, we want to create new mechanisms where the institutions and also backbone organizations like the Greater Houston Partnership can tap into that kind of data more directly, so they have more timely, actionable intelligence that they can use to inform the development of their programs. So we've got an ambitious vision, but it's really made possible through some of this early work that we'd already started before the pandemic hit us, and now we're accelerating, and we're already in discussions with institutions around the state about how we can take some of the lessons learned and the tools and resources we're developing around GradTex statewide quickly. So that's part of our legislative appropriations request, is we did ask for $4 million of additional funding from the legislature so we could accelerate statewide adoption of these resources. But we're not just waiting on those discussions. We're also actively engaging and planning with institutions about how we can move quickly to scale what we're learning.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like to me that if there's a million, some college and no degree, and you can provide the data to show that, okay, you get the degree in a particular area and your opportunities and income will increase, there's a lot of low-hanging fruit. And to the extent that you have this data infrastructure, that the coordinating board, commissioner will kind of coordinate and maintain. That's a great benefit for the institution. So they don't have to rely just on themselves. I mean, they can tap a resource that's, statewide, or in Harris County's case, Houston area. But anyway, really exciting stuff. Any other comments or questions? Okay. Well, just keep this up to date. Obviously, that's a very important effort. Okay, so the next item is lunch, but it's only 10:30, so we're going to skip lunch and maybe have lunch after the next committee meeting. So the next agenda item is Agenda Item 9, matters relating to the Committee on Academic and Workforce Success, chaired by Dr. Fred Barrias. Fred?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Agenda Item 9A, thank you for joining us for matters relating to the Committee on Academic and Workforce Success. Agenda Item 9B through 9I were approved on the consent calendar. We move on to Agenda Item 9J, which is consideration of adopting the study regarding streamlining physician licensing requirements for advanced practice registered nurses, Texas Education Code Section 61.06693. Dr. Stacy Silverman, Assistant Commissioner for Academic Quality and Workforce, will present this item and then will be available to questions. Dr. Silverman.
Good morning, Dr. Farias, and good morning, board members. The report is coming to the board as a draft. This is to allow the required collaborators time to provide input to the draft report. Senate Bill 2011, passed last session, requires the coordinating board to collaborate with at least one institution of higher education, the Texas Medical Board, and the Board of Nursing to conduct a study regarding the feasibility of a pilot program to streamline the requirements for advanced practice registered nurses to become eligible for license to practice in medicine. In order to complete the study, coordinating board staff consulted with the Board of Nursing, the Medical Board, and representatives from the University of Texas Health Science Center in Houston. The report describes the education and licensure requirements for APRNs and those required of medical students and residents. The study also includes input from the Texas nurse practitioners and incorporates data from the Center for Nursing Workforce Studies and the Texas Medical and Dental Application Services. The report is due to the legislature on December 1st, and the recommendation is to authorize the commissioner to finalize the report and send the report to the legislature upon completion.
Thank you, Dr. Silverman. Members, any questions for Dr. Silverman on the issue? Okay, then what we'll do is ask for a motion. The staff asks for approval for the board to authorize the commissioner to finalize the study regarding the streamlining physician licensing requirements for advanced practice registered nurses and to send the report to the legislature upon completion. Do I have a motion for that?
So moved. Emma Schwartz.
Okay, we have a motion by Ms. Schwartz. Thank you. A second?
Second, Donna Williams.
Second by Ms. Williams. Is there any comment or question? Did I hear someone? Okay, hearing none, members, when I call your name, please state whether you're voting for or against. Mr. Anwar?
For.
Thank you. Mr. Campbell?
For.
Mr. Raven's not here, so Ms. Schwartz?
For.
Mr. Stedman? Chairman Stedman?
For.
Thank you. Mr. Torn?
For.
Ms. Williams?
For.
Mr. Wilson?
For.
Thank you all. Motion passes. We move on to agenda items 9K1 through 9K2, but these were already approved on the consent calendar, so we can move on to agenda item 9K3, which is consideration of adopting the request from the University of Texas Rio Grande Valley for a Doctor of Occupational Therapy, OTD, with a major in occupational therapy. Dr. Silverman will do the report, and Assistant Commissioner for Academic Quality and Workforce, she'll be available to answer questions. And also we have some guests from UTRGV. Would like to recognize them. They are online. That's Dr. Guy Bailey, the president of UTRGV. Thank you for joining us. Dr. John Kraus, Executive Vice President for Health Affairs and the Dean of the UTRGV School of Medicine, as well as Dr. Michael Laker, who's the Dean of College of Health Professions at UTRGV, and Dr. Shirley Wells, who's Chair of the Department of Occupational Therapy for this particular item. We welcome you all, and we'll hear from Dr. Silverman, and then we'll have some comments from anyone from UTRGV that would like to speak. Dr. Silverman.
Thank you, Dr. Frias. As you all heard yesterday at the cause committee, UTRGV is proposing a Doctor of Occupational Therapy degree program. UTRGV currently offers a master's degree program in occupational therapy, which would be phased out as the proposed entry-level doctoral degree is initiated. The proposed program would prepare students for professional practice and scholarly work and would enroll up to 32 students annually. The proposed face-to-face program would require 99 semester credit hours, post-bachelor's degree program beginning in summer 2021. In accordance with the institution's proposed hiring schedule, UTRGV will hire one core faculty member per year for the first 5 years of the program. By June 1st of each of these years, the institution will provide documentation of the hires, and the institution will seek accreditation from the national accreditor, the Accreditation Council for Occupational Therapy Education. The committee's recommendation is for approval, and as Dr. Farias mentioned, representatives are available to take any questions.
Yes, Dr. Bailey, would you like to say a few words? Anyone from UTRGV, please.
First of all, I'd like to thank the committee for its consideration of this proposal. It's an important proposal for us because the preferred credential for occupational therapists is changing, and within a few years, you'll need to have a doctorate to practice. This is an important program, I think, really for us and for the state. And we've had a very successful master's program. This should be a very seamless transition, and it will help us really serve the Valley and the state very well. So thank you for your support.
Thank you, Dr. Bailey. I see Dr. Kraus is here with us. Would you like to say a few words, Dr. Kraus, or Michael Licker, right?
Thank you, Dr. Farias, and thank you to the committee for your consideration of this request. I have really nothing further to add for this proposal beyond Dr. Bailey. This is certainly important to us, and we look forward to your consideration.
Thank you, Dr. Kraus. Dr. Laker, I see you on. Would you like to say a few words?
Sure, and thank you for the opportunity to speak, and thank you for your support on the program. As Dr. Bailey already mentioned, and Dr. Silverman as well, that we have a very successful MS program, and the MS program has been highly ranked by US News and World Report. Our faculty are recognized as highly accomplished educators in the field, and our students have very high pass rates, 92% and higher over the past 3 years, and most of them have job offers before they leave our programs. I think it's very important to understand that since inception of this MS program, the OTD profession has made significant progress in treatment modalities and understanding how to serve a population. And that requires really for our students to acquire many more skills and knowledge that they currently do not get in a master's degree program. In addition to that, the patient population has also become much more complex and very diverse, which really requires, again, more skills and knowledge, especially with patients that have comorbidities such as diabetes and obesity, asthma. And then, of course, many of our patients in the Valley, of course, have specific cultural and linguistic requirements as well that need to be taken care of in the treatment plans. All of that really requires additional training for our students. So this program is really needed by our students, it's needed by the profession, and it's needed by our workforce. And so I really thank you for your support and hope for approval of this program. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Laker. Before I make the motion, I'd like to ask if there's any questions, discussion, or any further discussion on this. Hearing none, I will make the motion to adopt the request for the University of Texas Rio Grande Valley for a Doctor of Occupational Therapy with a major in occupational therapy. Do I have a second?
Second, this is Dr.
Second by Ms. Williams. Thank you. Members, when I call your name, please state whether you're voting for or against. Mr. Anwar.
For.
Mr. Campbell. For. Ms. Schwartz.
For.
Chairman Stedman.
For.
Mr. Torn.
For.
Ms. Williams.
For.
Mr. Wilson.
For.
And myself, I vote for. Motion passes. Congratulations, UTRGV Health. We move on to Agenda Item 9K4, which is the consideration of adopting the request from the University of Texas Rio Grande Valley for a Doctor of Podiatric Medicine, DPM degree. Dr. Stacy Silverman, Assistant Commissioner for Quality, Academic Quality and Workforce, will answer any questions, or should be available to first present and then answer any questions. We do have, again, I mentioned Dr. Guy Bailey from UTRGV President online, as well as Dr. John Kraus, Executive Vice President for Health Affairs and the Dean of the School of Medicine, and Dr. Lawrence Harkless, who is the Interim Dean, School of Podiatric Medicine at UTRGV. We'll turn it over to Dr. Silverman.
Thank you, Dr. Farias. As I presented the item to the cause committee yesterday, UTRGV is proposing a Doctor of Podiatric Medicine to begin in the fall of 2022. The DPM would prepare students for licensure and entry into the practice of podiatry. The DPM would be a 4-year full-time face-to-face program aligned with UTRGV's allopathic or MD degree program. Podiatric medicine students would spend the first 2 years of the DPM program fully integrated with the medical students. If approved, the UTRGV DPM would be the 10th program in the US and the first program in Texas. The Bureau of Labor Statistics estimates a need for additional graduates in this area. In accordance with the institution's proposed hiring schedule, UTRGV will hire 3 core faculty members prior to enrolling students in fall 2022. By June 1st of 2022, the institution will provide documentation of the hires. The institution will also seek accreditation for the DPM program from the national accreditor, the Council on Podiatric Medical Education. The committee's recommendation is for approval.
Thank you, Dr. Silverman. Would Dr. Bailey or Dr. Kraus, Dr. Harkless like to say a few words?
This is Guy Bailey. And first of all, again, thank you for your consideration of this program. As you may or may not know, in 1973, the Texas State Legislature authorized the establishment of a School of Podiatric Medicine in the state, and it has never been established. And so we think there's been a recognition for a long time for the need of such a school. This is particularly important in the Rio Grande Valley. We have a very high incidence of diabetes, perhaps 38% of the population. And as you probably know, foot problems are paramount with this disease. Podiatrists provide efficient, relatively inexpensive, and effective ways of treating these problems. So this is crucial for our area, and we also think for the state and the region. So thank you so much for your support.
Thank you, Dr. Bailey. Dr. Kraus?
Yes, thank you, Dr. Farias. And again, thank you to the committee. This is an extremely important program, not only for the Rio Grande Valley, but for the state of Texas. We have among the highest incidence of diabetes in the country here in the Valley. And as everyone knows, foot and ankle disease, lower limb disease is so endemic among patients with diabetes. This is an important program. The healthcare providers in the Valley are extremely enthusiastic about the ability to train more podiatrists and bring them for care. And we are strongly supportive in the School of Medicine, as well as partnering with Dr. Harkless in this program and bringing it to fruition. So thank you again to the committee for its consideration.
Yes, sir. Dr. Harkless, would you like to say a few words, please? Dr. Harkless on? I thought I saw him online. He may not be. Okay, he's the interim dean of the School of Podiatry at UTRGV.
Can you hear me?
Oh, now we can hear you. Yes, Dr. Harkless, we can hear you now.
I'm sorry. No, I was just saying thank you all for considering the College of Podiatric Medicine. And as I alluded to in the committee yesterday, it's probably the most exciting thing happening to the state of Texas as it relates to diabetes. I chaired the Diabetes Council for the state from 2001 to 2007, and Governor Bush put me on the council in '95. And so diabetes is a major problem all over the state, especially with the 254 counties, et cetera. So not only will it serve the Valley, but I really believe it will be one of the top schools because it's the first one where a major state and a major university decide our profession is significantly important. And I've been here a little over a year, putting together the academic plan and I couldn't be more accepted by the medical program and the integration of that. As I always say, population health, workforce, and interprofessional education are the three drivers, and podiatry is an integral part of that to keep people healthy and walking. So I look forward to being a leader within the UT system for research, integrating with the other institutions. I was at the Health Science Center for 30 years in San Antonio, so I understand how that works and how that integrates. So thank you all. We look forward to that and to have an outstanding school.
Thank you, Dr. Harkless and Dr. Bailey and Dr. Kraus for all your work. I know that the community down here in the Valley where I live is very thrilled about the proposal and about all that you have done over the last couple of years in terms of organizing this, and not only for the Valley, but as you all stated, for the state and Dr. Harkless's connections with the podiatric community around the country. Research and all that can come from this is going to be outstanding. So we look forward to success in that area. Before I make the motion on this, is there any further discussion or questions for Dr. Silverman or any of our presenters? Hearing none, I will make the motion to adopt the request from the University of Texas Rio Grande Valley for a Doctor of Podiatric Medicine, a DPM degree and program. Do I have a second?
Emma Schwartz will second.
Thank you. Second by Ms. Schwartz. When I call your name, please state whether you're voting for or against. Mr. Anwar.
For.
Mr. Campbell. For. Ms. Schwartz.
For.
Chairman Stedman.
For.
Mr. Torn.
For.
Ms. Williams.
For.
Mr. Wilson.
For.
And I enthusiastically vote for. And motion passes. Congratulations to UTRGV Health. And thank you all for being here on the call.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we move to Agenda Item 9L. Agenda Item 9L is consideration of approving the issuance of a request for applications for the Minority Health Research and Education Grant Program. Dr. Stacy Silverman, Assistant Commissioner for Academic Quality and Workforce, will present this item and will be available to answer questions. Dr. Silverman.
Thank you, Dr. Farias. The Minority Health Research and Education Grant Program was established in 1999 as a result of the state's tobacco lawsuit settlement. The grants are provided by the interest earnings from the permanent fund for the program. To award the grants, the Higher Education Coordinating Board requests applications from public and independent accredited general academic and health-related institutions. The academic clinical partnerships under this program helps address the challenges related to clinical site shortages and has expanded students' clinical training in Texas communities with health disparities. The first round of academic clinical partnership grants was awarded through an RFA released in 2017 and supported approximately 130 clinical placements for students in counseling, occupational therapy, physical therapy, physician assistant studies, rehabilitation counseling, respiratory care, and social work. In September 2019, additional awards allowed for the support of partnerships in the disciplines of clinical psychology, nursing, nutrition, and optometry, and will provide nearly 100 clinical placements by August 31st of 2021. Approximately $2.5 million is currently available for additional academic clinical partnership awards. An RFA could be published in the spring with awards announced by early summer. The committee's recommendation, actually, the staff recommendation is for approval of the issuance of a request for applications.
Thank you, Dr. Silverman. Are there any questions for Dr. Silverman? If not, and no discussion, do I have a motion to adopt the request for approving the issuance of a request for applications for the Minority Health Research and Education Grant Program?
Aye.
Okay,
So
motion, Mr. Anwar, or Ms. Schwartz, did you have a question? Okay,
No.
so I have a motion by Mr. Anwar, correct?
Yes.
Thank you. And a second by,
Ms. Williams, Donna Williams, second.
okay, Ms. Williams, second. Thank you. Members, when I call your name, please state whether you're voting for or against. Mr. Anwar.
For.
Mr. Campbell. For. Ms. Schwartz.
For.
Chairman Stedman.
For.
Mr. Torn.
4.
Ms. Williams,
4.
Mr. Wilson.
4.
I vote for, so the motion passes. Thank you all. We move on to agenda item 9M. Agenda item 9N is consideration of approving the issuance for a request for applications to solicit employers to offer internships through the Texas Works Internship Program. Jarrell Booker, JD, Assistant Commissioner for College Readiness and Success, will present this item and be available to answer questions. Mr. Booker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As a reminder for Agenda 9M, the 86th Legislature approved a statewide internship program for undergraduate students to get paid internships off campus to actually improve their marketable skills or their workforce skills. In that requirement, the agency is required to pay 50% of the salaries, and the job that they actually receive will pay the other 50%. We are requesting an RFP for 2 reasons. The first reason, or excuse me, an RFA for 2 reasons. The first reason is so we can solicit employers to offer the internships. We have to make sure that employers have the administrative and financial capacity to actually offer internships for the state. And the second reason is we needed a mechanism or system to be able to pay our 50% portion to the employers to actually cover the remaining part of the student's internship. This RFA allows us to do that. I'm available for any questions, and I'm seeking favorable approval for the RFA.
Thank you, Mr. Booker. Any questions or discussion on this topic, members of the board? If not, do I have a motion to adopt the request of approving the issuance of a request for applications to solicit employers to offer internships to the Texas Works Internship Program? Do I have a motion, please?
So moved. Welcome, Wilson.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson. We have a motion on the floor by Mr. Wilson. Do I have a second?
Second, Donna Williams.
Thank you. Second by Ms. Williams. Members, when I call your name, please state whether you're voting for or against. Mr. Anwar.
For.
Mr. Campbell. Mr. Campbell.
For.
Thank you. Yeah, I can hear you. Thank you. Ms. Schwartz.
4.
Chairman Stedman.
4.
Mr. Torn.
4.
Ms. Williams.
4.
Mr. Wilson.
4.
And I vote for, so the motion passes. Thank you all. Agenda items 9N through 9P3 were approved on the consent calendar, so we can move on to agenda item 9P4, which is consideration of adopting the proposed amendments to Chapter 4, Subchapter C, Sections 4.56, 4.57, and 4.62 of Board Rules concerning for the Texas Success Initiative. Members, this item was removed from the consent calendar earlier in the meeting. Jarrell Booker, Assistant Commissioner for College Readiness and Success, is available to answer questions.
Thank you, Commissioner, our Chairman. What we have here is we're seeking adoption of rules for the Texas Success Initiative, TSI. As many of you know, TSI is our state's method for determining a student's college readiness. Last year, we received approval from you all to issue an RFP to select a vendor to design and implement our newest version of the Texas Success Initiative assessment. And the College Board won that bid and was selected to design and implement that test. Our first TSI assessment was implemented in 2013, and these current rules in front of you pertain to the upgraded version of the TSI assessment, as well as how we hope to continue to address lower skilled students with developmental education. State law requires the board to approve an assessment instrument, and for college readiness, and TSIA is that instrument. 7 years ago, we've learned a great deal about the exam and college readiness and K-12 through higher ed and dealing with developmental education. And the improvements in this test that we're discussing today are a combination of what we needed and what we wanted and what we've learned over these last 7 years. The test is also aligned with our new college readiness benchmarks. And what we had yesterday was Dr. Luz Bay from the College Board, a psychometrician from the College Board, explained to the committee the industry standard the test was developed and the process we went over the last year of bringing in faculty 2-year, 4-year across the state to actually develop the newest text instrument and design it for the needs of the state. In that committee meeting, we discussed how we set those benchmarks, what psychometrics were used. And for us, we look at a 70% likelihood of a student scoring an A, B, or C in their entry-level college course. So that's how this was built. That's kind of the premise of where we are with this exam. The reason it was pulled off of consent is we received comments from 4 collective groups, and we wanted to make sure they were addressed. And we even had someone testify yesterday from one of the groups from the Dana Center. The groups talked about 4 or 5 different topics that were of concern. One was the date when we would implement it. One of the schools wanted to push it back 2 weeks. We are implementing it January 11th of 2021. Gives us time to do professional development, but also based off of K-12, based off of when students are going to be applying for college and needing this information, we needed to do it January 11th. So we will work with that school to try to get them up to speed and make it work for their needs. Second comment came around writing score. Previously, the writing essay portion of the exam was separate from the English language arts and math. We've now combined it with English language arts to match how we teach Dev Ed and do the work in the field to make it simpler. So we explained that. The third was around co-requisite. Many of you may recall that when you are college ready based off of a number of different measures, you're required to take developmental education. We, under co-rec and under state law, have asked that, from state law, you're required to have up to 75% of these students who barely are close to college ready to take not only the Dev Ed class or get some sort of Dev Ed remediation, but to also take the college course. We think that's the best way to go. We've seen a lot of success that if students barely make it, even students who are barely showing college ready, that having some sort of support is important. And this co-rec process allows them to do that. And we're asking for 100% of those students who are right there, who are almost college ready, to make sure they get some support in developmental ed, as well as take the college course at the same time. We've seen thousands and thousands of students that we didn't have before actually succeeding into their first level college course. The last comment we received and was testified was also the thought that maybe this would not be able to support minority students, low income students, and maybe the math might be not too difficult, but maybe not at the algebra level, and maybe should include more around stat or entry level stat. And this comment wanted us to delay to do more examination and more review of other measures for showing college readiness. Our response to that was approving these rules, approving this current exam does not prevent us from research and measuring it. And the commissioner has provided some flexibility through the end of summer to allow multiple measures in addition to this exam for institutions to have more flexibility and for institutions to determine the best supports for their students to get them college ready, no matter what that may be. We feel confident that we've developed a quality and national model exam and assessment for college readiness, and we ask for approval for these rules so we can actually begin implementation and training around the new assessment.
Thank you, Mr. Booker. Any questions or comments from the board for Mr. Booker? Okay. Hearing none, do I have a motion to adopt the proposed amendments to Chapter 4, Subchapter C, Sections 4.6, 4.57, that's 4.56, 4.57, and 4.62 of Board Rules concerning the Texas Success Initiative? Do I have a motion?
Emma Schwartz will move.
Okay, Ms. Schwartz, thank you for the motion. Do I have a second, please?
Second.
I'm sorry, the second was by Mr. Torn. Thank you, Mr. Torn. Okay, so members, when I call your name, please state whether you're voting for or against. Mr. Anwar?
For.
Mr. Campbell? For. Ms. Schwartz?
For.
Chairman Stedman?
For.
Okay, I'm just, Ms. Williams
4.
and Mr. Wilson.
4. And Mr. Torn votes 4.
Yes, I was getting ready to circle back, Mr. Torn. Thank you. And I vote 4 as well. Thank you. Motion passes. Okay. So I will, I was going to get you, Mr. Torn. Don't worry. So it was unanimous. So that's good. So next, motion passed. So what I want to just quickly say, a little editorial. I really want to thank Ray Martinez, who is our deputy commissioner for working on all these projects with the academic committee, as well as Nicole Bucker Henderson, our counsel, and Mr. Booker for all the work that they've done to get these projects in order here, for a lot of changes here that we've had coming up with some of these issues. So I really appreciate that. So, Mr. Chairman, this concludes the agenda items relating to the Committee on Academic and Workforce Success. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Farias. Let's see, next is agenda item 10, matters relating to the Agency Operations Committee, chaired by Ricky Raven. The Vice Chair, Emma Swartz, will present these items as Ricky is not able to be with us today. Emma, I know this is a crushing duty, but I think you can handle it.
I'll take it on. You can grade me afterwards. All right. Well, good morning, everyone. During the Agency Operations Committee meeting yesterday, the committee approved the following items. Minutes from the July 22nd, 2020 Agency Operations Committee meeting. The acquisition of a 4-year contract for managed print services, and a resolution authorizing the issuance of State of Texas College student loan bonds in one or more series, and the delegation of the authority for administration and approval of these activities necessary to complete the sale of the private activity bonds. The committee also received a report on grants and contracts, an update on agency preparation for the 87th legislative session, a review of the fiscal year 2020 financial report, an update on internal audit reports and activities, an audit report on the financial management processes at the Higher Education Coordinating Board, and an update on compliance monitoring reports and activities. Agenda item 10B is a report on grants and contracts. This item was approved on consent. Agenda item 10C is consideration of adopting a resolution authorizing the issuance of State of Texas College student loan bonds in one or more series, and the delegation of authority for administration and approval of the activities necessary to complete the sale of the private activity bonds. This item was also approved on consent. And with that, this concludes the Agency Operations Committee agenda.
Thank you, Ms. Swartz. And this actually concludes our meeting at 11:02 a.m. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
Chairman, I have a question, or I just want to make a comment. So this is Fred Farias again. I want to also recognize Dr. Stacy Silverman, who helped so much in our committee. I was trying to do 3 things at one time when I made my list of Jarrell and Booker and her and Ray. So just wanted to add her to that list.
Well, that's important because you forgot Mr. Torn, now you forgot Dr. Silverman, and so I'm glad you're circling back. And
I am circling back because I'm trying to do 3 things at once and getting texts as well.
Okay. All right. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Motion by Dr. Farias. Do I have a second?
Second, Donna Williams.
Second by Ms. Williams. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. And any noes? Noes. A motion passes. We are adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye. Stay safe.